is not even. I have to outsmart it down in our farming zone much more than I do up on the North Shore. These white arrows are the direction of the winter wind. It's different than the summer wind, and it's different from depending where you're located. So our designers now, whatever city they're designing in, they put the direction of the prevailing winter wind into their CAD platform so they see it. Our designers design inside an office building. They don't feel the wind and the sun. We have to put it in there to remind them. So this is a very basic way to outsmart the wind. It's a snow fence. The way the snow fence works is the wind blows towards it. The snow fence reduces its energy and it can't carry the snow, so it deposits it. You need a drop zone after your snow fence and before your road or your parking lot. And the snow fence can be made out of bushes or boards or berms or lots of different things. But this is more of a traditional way to outsmart the wind. If the fetch is greater than 1,000 feet, that's where MnDOT starts paying attention. The fetch is the distance of uninterrupted wind from the prevailing winter wind direction. So if you're in a wide open spot, watch out. But this is something I learned from the plow drivers, the unintentional snow fence. The snow and the wind doesn't know if those landscape shrubs are in a snow fence or not, but they dissipate the wind energy. It can't carry the snow anymore, and it drops it right on your sidewalk, your front steps, or whatever. So if you put your landscaping on the other side, or if you set it back so there's a drop zone before your pavement, we can get rid of a lot of these persistent problems. So we can outsmart the wind. So far, so good?
Mhm.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, because you had mentioned the leafless trees being letting more light in. Would that be the same for the shrubs, like blocking the wind, or would you need ones that are green all year round, or can you have things that do lose their leaves in the winter?
Oh, such a good question. So what I would say about this is with snow fence design, we want to have something to interfere with the wind right at the ground level and up, it varies in height, maybe up to 8 feet. So we don't want like an apple tree that has like a stem and then the branches. We want more of a shrub or a pine tree or something that has the lower branches. So they don't necessarily have to have the leaves, but they have to have some mass all the way from the ground level up.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, and really the design criteria is optimal at about a 50% porosity. So instead of a solid wall, about 50% airspace. I love it when you ask questions, you guys. It's way more fun. So another thing we talk about is drainage, winter drainage. So this is a freeway ramp. The top of the hill is where my arrow is. And that snow is just melting onto our ramp, freezing. They're salting it. You could probably squint and see tire tracks in the mud above the road. The day I drove this, somebody had crashed over the signal light because this is a repeated cycle of thaw, sprawl, freeze, salt, danger. So this design works fine for the rain. It just doesn't work for the snow. And really, meltwater sprawl is everywhere. We see it all the time. We don't design to contain it. It just makes sheets of ice. And it looks like in Forest Lake, you get about 49 thaw freeze events in an average winter, which means you go from below freezing to above freezing. Now, not all those times you have snow on the ground. Sometimes they're just too brief to melt the snow. And we don't have the data to know how many of these really causes this problem. But just pick a number, pick, I don't know, half. Let's say that you have 25 of these events every winter. And we know through design, we can control that if we put that as our goal. Or if we put that in our criteria for any developments going in your watershed, we need meltwater control. By the way, with climate change, you're getting slightly more events than you used to of these. It's a pretty slow rate of change for Forest Lake compared to Grand Rapids, Minnesota, but it's still a positive trend. So in our intersection design, we're looking at the braking zone and we're saying we don't want meltwater sprawl through these critical areas where we need traction. You don't know where those critical areas are. You follow the plow driver around. That's where they salt the most. That's where the accidents are. That's where people lose control of their cars. The sharp curves, the braking zones, the steep hills, the front doors, the crosswalks, etc. Those are critical areas. And if we apply low salt design to critical areas, we get the best return on our investment. According to my imagination, there's no statistics on it because we just invented it. So I call that horizontal drainage. I call this vertical drainage. Snow lands on all sorts of things that are really tall. And guess what? That 50 inches of snow still melts. And when it melts, where is it going? If it goes to your sidewalk or your front steps or your parking lot, your road, you're in trouble. So we just have to imagine where the snow all falls. It's on your lawn, it's on the parking lot islands, it's on the roof. Nobody ever plows this, but it's still going to melt. And you need to control it in design. So far, so good. Yeah. So this is just a little kind of fun picture. So the Edina maintenance crew on 50th in France taught me this. They said, Connie, the awnings on all those shops collect the snow. We go out, we clear the snow after the snowstorm, we get it all fine. And then 3 days later, we get a sunny day and those awnings all start to drip on our sidewalks. And overnight they freeze. And some awnings stick out 1 foot, some stick out 2 feet, some stick out 3 feet. He said, it's a nightmare. We can never get on top of it. I've also heard the same complaint with decks. So like on apartment buildings where they run a sidewalk close to the building underneath decks at a higher elevation and they drip on them all winter. So this is something, if you guys, I don't know, if you get involved in sustainable building policy, I'm working with Hopkins on that and trying to add low salt design into sustainable building policy. So I'm learning a lot right now. My brain is like under pressure. All right, here's another thing the plow drivers taught me. Make it easy to plow. If you create an obstacle course, they can't do a good job clearing the snow. And if they can't do a good job clearing the snow, guess what? You got all sorts of bunches of snow here and there that is going to melt and create ice and create problems. So we think this parking lot in the top right is beautiful, and it is for Georgia. It is not for Minnesota. It's not a sustainable design. We've worked with the city of New Brighton. They changed their parking lot standards in regard to parking lot islands, because parking lot islands are a menace in a couple ways. One is they gather snow and they melt and they sprawl ice patches all over weird spots of your parking lot. And the other thing is they're difficult to plow around, so we don't do a good job of removing the snow. So we got like the double whammy winter problems with our current parking lot island standards. We got to rethink those. So hopefully this is all making sense to you.
Does that mean fewer of the islands being used, or is that the solution to that problem?
You know, I like kind of this top left. It's a big long island. It's kind of a straight line. It's also an inverted island. So if we push the snow in there, it's not going to melt and sprawl back out onto the parking lot. So it just has more features to help us in winter than like this bottom picture here, where, you know, backing up a plow is not that easy. It's not safe for anybody, for plants, for animals, for people, for the cement. So.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. How are we doing on time? Ooh, I better get going. Okay, snow storage. Would you believe when we started investigating, we couldn't find any guidelines for how much space we need to store snow? You guys have any criteria in your standards? How much space
No.
you're requiring developments to have for snow storage? And why is that? Because we know we have to store it and we don't want this to happen. So anyhow, we created a snow pile calculator, and we don't have much data to true it, but it's based on the annual average snow and what we think we need for space. I guess I didn't put your projections in there. I would say just roughly you'll need 20%. So if your parking lot's 1,000 feet, you need 200 feet to store your snow. I mean, I could look up exactly what your numbers are. And we do not want snow storage at the top of the hill. We want snow storage at the bottom of the hill for obvious reasons. Or if we can't put it at the bottom of the hill, we want to intercept it and we want to route it to where we want it to go. And just one last tip, if you put the storm drain in the handicap's parking spot, I think you should have to go to jail, because that is the most dangerous spot in the parking lot, is the storm drain spot. Everything flows through it. So there you go. Okay, this is nothing new. So I have spent a little bit of time just sharing some winter thoughts. We now do some special plan sheets for our customers where we just put the symbols of some of our thinking about winter in there. It's not a construction plan sheet that you would give out to the, you know, the cement mixer people. It's just for the customer education, like, hey, we thought about winter and here's where we integrated it. And if you're trying to adhere to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency's chloride management plan, which asks everybody to drop down their salt use, guess what? I now have evidence that on my school, that on my police station, that on my library, I did that. I did something different. So right now, I've spent 2 years training our internal crew, and we're getting pretty good. And I'm working with some pilot cities right now where I train them in these concepts. And we do a bunch of other things together, looking at policy, ordinance, standards. And so we're teaching each other. So these are my pilot cities. I don't have a pilot watershed, don't have a pilot sewer shed. I don't have a pilot campus yet. But I'm in discussion with the Mayo Clinic. They might be our first campus. some other cities and a township. Because, you know, it's new. And I'm really excited to work with a group that's interested to see how it fits into their world. And I've learned so much already from our pilots. It's anyhow, it's really cool. So I am going to turn off my, maybe I'll quit sharing if I can figure out how to. I don't think I can. Oh, here we go. So I can see you. All right. So let's just open it up to talk about winter and ask away any questions or comments. Love to hear what you're thinking.
So Connie, what is MnDOT's policy right now regarding salting? The reason I ask the question is Highway 97 is on the south side of Forest Lake. So there's 3.5 miles of highway that is salted by MnDOT every winter, and it all ends up in Forest Lake. So what is their policy regarding salting?
Well, I guess you would have to look at that particular stretch, but they
Yeah.
do assign a level of service to, you know, every segment of their roadway with recovery times and goals. So it depends a lot on the traffic and the speed. Well, I guess most of them are high speed, but what is their goal for recovery? And that dictates a lot the salt use.
So each highway within the state has a different allotment of salt on it?
It has a different goal. So, and
Okay.
it's not just a highway, it might be just a stretch. It might be this mile of the highway, you know, that runs through Edina or Grand Rapids or whatever. This is how fast we need it to recover. And, you know, the public is very demanding. And a
Yeah.
lot that drives a lot of those standards too. So.
Connie, I had a question. I'm sure that this would have been captured in a longer presentation, but you identified those pilot cities. So, you know, obviously no promises from us as watershed district staff. But in the case that you become a pilot watershed or a pilot city, like what does that actually involve?
Good question.
What is that?
Well, first off, it requires some money because most of, well, I would say all of the pilots I'm working with, it's somewhere between like $20,000 and $35,000 that we work with them for about a year. So the first thing that we do with all of them is bring the architects, the civil engineers, the mayor, the city council, the forester, the people that influence the design, plan reviewers through our training. So it's a half-day training. Next thing we've done with almost all of them is we have winter maintenance experts bring us on a tour, half-day tour of the worst, nastiest sites they deal with in the winter and why. And so we have our group and we go, okay, what did we learn in low salt design training that would apply to this problem? Oh, well, we should remove those spruce trees that are shading the senior center front door, you know, or whatever. So we get to practice our thinking on real sites. And then this is where it kind of varies. 3 of my pilot cities, we have 10 2-hour meetings with them. And at each meeting, they bring a piece of city code or a checklist or a ordinance or something. And we kind of pick it apart. We say, let's talk about parking lot islands. Why do you want one every 9 parking spots? What's your goal? Well, maybe it's traffic calming. Maybe it's so we don't get the parking lot so hot. We're gonna have a tree. Maybe it's some kind of habitat or beautification, or I don't know, whatever they say. And then we just add winter onto it. Okay, let's say this is what we're gonna do now. Every 9 parking lot spots, you're gonna have an ice patch. And they're gonna salt it. 7 times until the next snow, and they push it on the island. And it kills the vegetation. So eventually we're just gonna have rocks in that island. And maybe a boulder and a tree stump. That's what's gonna be there. So knowing all these things, then how do we align to get the beauty and the traffic calming and the habitat and the winter performance? What would we think we could change? So we go through that, a plan review checklist. What are we looking for right now? And what might we want to look for, like snow storage? So in this process, I'll just say Hopkins has decided to put low salt design in their sustainable building policy that they're soon to adopt. So we discovered they were considering this. We looked at how to add it in. So that's one thing. A different city wanted to do a chloride management plan for just winter. Like in maintenance, in policy, and in design, what do we need to do for our city to move forward? Another city wants to look at a stormwater credit based on maintenance. This is commercial maintenance and commercial site design. I think several of our pilots are going to do some sort of a fact sheet. We haven't gotten there yet, where they can distribute these concepts beyond their watershed. And I think all of our pilots have agreed to speak at conferences, write journal articles, and just share their experience. We do meet quarterly as a group, and we just say, well, Richfield, what have you been doing? Hopkins. Eden Prairie is in the process of redesigning their police station. It's moving using the low salt design strategies. So that those kind of things, it's kind of fun to see how they're moving ahead. But yeah, we do customize the list of activities based on the interest of the city. Was that too long of an answer?
Oh, that was great.
Okay. I would just tell you too, that there's an MPCA planning grant right now, a sustainable planning grant that I think could be earmarked towards low salt design, because I think the applications are due November 14th. But I think winter sustainability, like, we don't think about it.
Tom, I see you were trying to ask a question, but we can't hear you for some reason. You want to try putting your question in the chat? Your audio was working earlier, so I don't know what that's about.
Well, Tom's typing. I'll just say that Adam did a little thing for the science teachers in his old watershed, where he brought them together, and he had me come and present this, the chloride problem, and a little bit about low salt design to the science teachers, trying to get that new way of thinking into that next generation. Oh, that was fun.
Sure.
With how much salt reduction would I expect? That is $1 million question. I think this is what we need to know. What is the current meltwater footprint of the site? So if you're the grade school and you store your snow at the top of the parking lot, and every time it melts, it covers the parking lot, then I think we could do the calculation. But I think we need to know, at least from that aspect, what is the current footprint? And if we had a design standard, what would it be? Would we say 20% meltwater footprint's acceptable, 50%, 2%? Since we have no baseline. Same with our drifting snow. How much of it re-enters your sidewalk, your parking lot, and your road, and you need to deal with it over and over again? We don't really know. Yeah, that's a great thing. I'll just tell you this, that Iowa's Homeland Security Emergency Management Planner approached me to better understand low salt design. He said all of our communities have an emergency management plan on file with us so they can have access to funds if an emergency happens. And he said in winter, their emergency plan is get a snow plow and salt. He goes, it's so lame, but we never knew what to do to improve our infrastructure resiliency until he heard me do one of these little talks. So we're now in discussion with them to do sort of a cost benefit calculator. If we put 80 tons of salt on the bridge every lane mile every year, how soon till the bridge crumbles versus how much would it cost to redesign the bridge? You know, these kind of things. So we're not there yet, but it is getting really good attention and traction in bits and pieces as people hear about it.
That's really boring.
All right, do we have any more questions for Connie?
Can I ask one last one, or are we out of time?
No,
We have some time.
Okay.
yeah, I'm not in a hurry.
Okay, cool. Also, I just wanted to echo Victoria in the chat and say thank you for presenting. This was really interesting. And I was just wondering, when you do have more sunlight, does that create those melt thaw events more so? Like, do you anticipate water being left on the sidewalk in a sunnier exposed area that could then be problematic ice when it cools down? Or is that not an issue when you use the sun to help?
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up. I guess if you have a meltwater sprawl problem, using the sun could make it worse. In my imagination, if we do a low salt design, we have a problem when we first plow the snow. You know, we get that residual quarter inch, half inch, whatever, that takes so long to melt without all the salt that sunlight would speed it up. However, you're absolutely right. If we got a snowbank on both sides of the sidewalk, and when the sun shines on it more, it's going to sprawl more. So we got to definitely manage that. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, we got some good thinkers here. And I'll just say to the watershed, since this is also new, you know, we're just inventing it as we go. We're the first state, obviously, that's going to be doing it and stuff. So on, if you ever have funds for research, you know, we'd love to improve our snow pile calculator. We'd love to get some baseline information on meltwater sprawl. What are we looking at? Or any of the other things that we have no baseline.
All right. Well, thank you, Connie. CAC members, as you have questions, I'll pass along contact information, and I hope that this is a conversation that we can continue in our next couple of meetings. So thank you so much, Connie. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for joining us.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.